Well, hello. Welcome to day 2 of the Ethics Across the Curriculum in the Yard workshop. This is a joint endeavor from the James Stockdale Center for Ethical Leadership and the Naval Academy Center for Teaching and Learning. I'm Jeff McCrease. I'm the Deputy Director of the Stockdale Center. We're on day 2, Tuesday's outcomes. The workshop overview for 2021 is as follows. Yesterday, we provided a broad overview of our 4-semester leadership sequence. Today, Tuesday, we'll turn the floor over to Dr. Roger Herbert and Professor Marcus Hedal for a broad overview of moral reasoning based on how we teach it here at the Naval Academy. Tomorrow, Wednesday, will be a workshop that's devoted to the constructional learning outcomes, and as well a discussion of bringing new technology and podcasting to the study and dissemination of ethical issues. Thursday is an asynchronous project work day, and Friday is a day of presentations. So at this point, I'd like to turn the floor over to Professor Roger Herbert for a deep dive into ethics and moral reasoning and how we teach it here at the Naval Academy. Professor Roger Herbert, over to you, sir.
Awesome, Jeff. Thank you. And it's so great to be a part of this this seminar. And I'm super bummed that I'm not there because you guys seem like a fun crowd. By the way, is my slide up? Is my slide back up? Can somebody confirm I've got my slides back up?
It's up, Roger, but it's on the side. I don't know if that's if we can.
Mm-hmm.
Is it still up for you, Roger?
What's that?
Is it still up for you?
Yeah, I mean, I see my slides, but.
Try going to
Yeah, and then maybe pin.
child or pin and then pin it.
Yeah, there we go. Go, Roger. You're good.
Okay, good. Well, again, it's great to talk to y'all, and again, I wish I were there. So this is an observation that one of our students put down in her SOF, and at the end of the semester, and you know, it's a clever way of thinking about the course, but she was really prescient when you think about it, because this was long before we had this SOF was many years before we had the moral deliberation roadmap that we currently work off of. So she came with her compass. That's probably her moral intuition. I don't know if we really used to provide a map. Maybe more provided some good waypoints or something. But as we've evolved the course, we've developed the moral deliberation roadmap, which we'll be talking a great deal about today. But let's kind of press on this metaphor for just a bit, the metaphor of a map. Kind of a show of hands, how many of you all, when you were heading to Loose today, pulled out a map? Really, nobody? Was it because like this just wasn't important and you didn't care if you got lost or something? So why not? Why didn't you use a map to get to Loose today?
Because I knew where it was already.
How did you know that?
Through habit, I've driven.
Yeah, I mean that's how we negotiate. You know, most of our direction. We know where we're going. So so moving on in this. Okay, so when is it time to break out a map? What are some of the reasons that you would break out a map? in general. Okay, so if you're lost, you pull out a map, definitely.
If you know you're going to unfamiliar territory.
Great. When you're this is not the normal course of events that I'm going on. This is not a place that I've developed a habit to getting to. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, when you would like to make a plan.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So maybe you've got several good options. You've got several good routes, and you want to pick the best one, or you want to avoid a bad one. Okay, so there are good reasons to pull out a map, and that's really up to a large extent. That is what we focus on in the initial parts of this course is how we perceive the moral world, and when that time might be to pull out our moral liberation roadmap. In other words, we're not going to be walking around with a moral liberation roadmap in front of our faces all the time. Just like you're not going to drive with a roadmap in front of your face all the time. It's dangerous. But there are times that we have to pull it out. So what I want to focus on in the beginning of this is that question of when is it the right time to pull out a roadmap. And then Marcus is going to follow on with detailing what that roadmap is. And then he's going to conclude with a deep dive into virtue ethics. Okay, so that's what today will look like. Sound good? Okay. Awesome. So we make countless, choices with moral content in them. Every day. So I'm closing on my house. So I basically moved out of my house here, and I'm staying at Professor Rage's house. And it didn't even occur to me that with him not here, I could just kind of rifle through his stuff and take what I like. I didn't have to stop and think about that. Here's another example. I didn't, last night my temperature spiked really high. It's like a little over 102. So it didn't even occur to me that I should be going in and potentially infecting you guys, even though, I really prefer to teach in person. The camera adds 5 pounds and all that. But the reason that these things I can make these decisions without stopping to consult Immanuel Kant is that I've just developed habits through my life. I know that I don't steal things just because I can. I know I don't infect people. I don't harm other people just because I prefer to teach in person. So these are just the moral habits that I've developed through my life. And this is most of what the moral universe is all of these things, all of these habits these good habits that we've developed through our lives. This is that moral intuition that most of our students do come to this school with. And it's going to, it'll get you through most every day of your life. But every once in a while, you're confronted with a decision you're confronted with a situation and a choice that just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel the same as all those other decisions that you made during the day. And typically you just feel it, right? The hair on the back of your neck stands up, or you get this kind of pit in your stomach. It's like, oh, this one might be difficult. And I'm sorry. By the way, I want to frame the larger question of when is it time to pull out the moral liberation roadmap with 4 preliminary questions. Okay. So question number 1 is this a routine moral choice or one that warrants deliberate moral reflection? Again, typically we can just feel that. We know the answer because of that gut, that terrible feeling in our gut. There was a philosopher who gave a talk at the Naval Academy many years ago. His name is Rushworth Kidder, and just for his discussion here at the Naval Academy, he wanted to bring in a nautical perspective here. So he introduced the idea of a moral thermocline. Can anybody quickly, what's a thermocline?
It's just a gradient in temperature of the water. So water is usually warm at the top and then it gets colder as you go down. Sound travels differently when you get below the thermocline. I'm a submariner, this is easy.
Yeah, great. And so, and it doesn't, and Tom, I'm not surprised that it was you who answered that. But yeah, so water is really weird though, too. I mean, so it doesn't just kind of get colder, right? It layers. And doesn't that affect your sonar and stuff like that?
Yes, sir. Yeah, sound travels differently depending on where you're at. So you want to get in the same space as another submarine so you can hear it.
Yeah. And one of the things I ask my students is, okay, what's the color of the water above the thermocline? And weirdly, I'll get things like blue and green and brown and black. And, it's like, and I have to kind of hold up it's like, no, water's clear. And then what's the color of the water below the thermocline? And the weirdest answer I got was orange. And this was like one of my best students. And he talked about the refraction of or something. It's like, dude, I think you're overthinking this problem. So it's clear above, it's clear below. You just feel it. You just all of a sudden, it's like, oh, I've passed through that. And if you ever, for any scuba divers out there, if you ever dove kind of deep, you just get this feeling. And I think that's a really important and reasonably reliable way of recognizing that you have crossed the moral thermocline, that you just feel it. But there are some alerts, I think. The first one is just any time that you're involved with a decision that is going to affect other people or going to affect a value, and you just haven't seen this before. That's an alert that it may be time to pause and deliberate. If you can actually see some conflicting moral obligations, if you can have one good or the other good, but not both goods, that's a hint. Or just I tell you that that feeling that I could get in trouble for this. I mean, I'm 60 years old. I still think that sometimes. And maybe it's a good, reliable gauge that we've crossed the moral thermocline. There are also, however, external influences that both shape and bias our ability to perceive the moral world, to maybe understand that we have indeed crossed the moral thermocline. And this is what we talk about during the first 2 weeks of the class during our moral perception block. And so what are those external influences that shape our ability to see what our moral obligations are? The first one we talk about is we read a really excellent piece by sociologist Christian Smith. I think he's an American sociologist. About the role that cultural narratives play. We're all swimming in this sea of narratives, and we don't even really know it unless for some reason we're pulled out. And these narratives, obviously, they're important. Okay, so they put the world into context for us. They put new situations into context, and we can say, okay, I know where to go with this because I've got these stories that I've been brought up with since I was a child. Certainly, we have we're brought up on the stories of our founding generations, and it can actually be a little off-putting, as we're seeing in some of the culture wars today, to hear it's like, well, wait a second, that might not be the right narrative to help us make difficult decisions. There may also be competing narratives, and I think we're seeing that now too. In Bancroft Hall, for instance, we try to introduce our students to a narrative about what the Naval Academy is and is not. Tom, I wonder if there are any counter narratives in the hall. Any other stories that people tell about what life as a midshipman is and what's expected of you as a midshipman?
There are several.
Yeah, and so this is the cultural narrative. Every community has a narrative. But at the end of this class, this seminar, we will have, or you all will probably have this narrative that was about this time together. So we all have these narratives, and very often they're so important because they highlight what is important on the moral terrain, but they can also obfuscate, and just being aware of that is key. We read a really interesting piece by C.S. Lewis called The Inner Rings. And I commend you. I think you should read that sometime. It's really short and it's worth reading. And he talks about this, how we humans are just driven, for want of a better term, to sit at the cool guy table. And he lays this out as a bit of a tragic cycle of we have this drive to sit at the cool guy table, and we sit at the cool guy table, and then we realize, well, this table isn't that cool, and but that table over there, and we can spend our lives chasing this. And he calls these the inner ringers. Guess what? He's describing all of us. He's saying that there are people out there who have gotten beyond being inner ringers. But we are all inner ringers. And this can likewise make you start losing touch with your moral obligations, with your moral responsibilities. So driven to that table that you overlook somebody who needs your help. And yeah, so you overlook some other basic moral obligations because of your drive to get to that inner ring. We introduce our students to another reading that I would commend you to, and that is a scholar from Georgetown Law School, David Lubin, wrote a piece called Integrity and Its Cures. And David is also a frequent flyer over here at Stockdale. So David conceptualizes integrity as we are people of integrity when our principles match our acts, and when they don't, which obviously happens all the time, when we act in a way that fails to meet up with our principles, we struggle. We suffer cognitive dissonance. Now there's two of me, and I've got to bring this together. And what David tells us is that there's one of two ways of bringing that back together, of becoming a person of integrity once again, after we've maybe lost that, while we're struggling cognitive dissonance. The one way is he just calls it the high road, is that so here are my principles and here are my acts. I need to bring my game up. So I need to do all of that hard work to make sure that that next time my actions and my principles will align. If I were to cheat on a test, some of that hard work might be going to my professor saying, I'm really sorry, I'm humiliated by this, but I just cheated on that test. So that's the high road, but David suggests that that's not really the road most people take. And in fact, what they will do is they are going to lower their standards. So we will become people of integrity one way or the other. And most of the time, that drive for integrity actually will result in degrading our principles. And the way that we get there is primarily through rationalizations. And we all do this all the time. We can rationalize away just about any behavior. We ask our students to read another excellent article. Actually, it was written about the Enron. It was written in the wake of Enron. And how are these people behaving in ways we're observing? And Anand and his co-authors list a kind of lay out a series of typology of rationalizations that help us get through this, help us to say, okay, no, what I'm doing right now is really not that bad. And he also talks about socialization. And in his case, he's only talking about kind of the bad form of socialization. In that, how do you bring in the new guy? How do you bring in the new guy into an organization, into a corrupt organization, and make sure that new guy gets with the program? But I mean, socialization happens all the time. Again, our students are socialized into this organization, and I mean, their whole plebe year is in some ways a socialization into this organization. However, They may also be socialized into some bad practices. For instance, if there is a counterculture out there, then perhaps Company X says, "Hey, come here. I know that's how the Naval Academy says we do things, but here's how we do things in Company X, Y, or Z." The last external influence that I argue shapes and biases our moral perception is time. And I'd actually like to spend a little time with this one. And I will elevate it to its own question. So my first question was, is this a routine choice or one that warrants deliberate moral reflection? If I think it's the latter, the next question I think I need to ask myself is, how much time do I have? Time really has two influences. One is if I really am under a time constraint, it is going to truncate my ability to reflect. But time also has another effect, and that is the perceived. It puts a perceived urgency on a decision. I'm a NOLS instructor, and one of the things I learned about NOLS medicine is you need to stop the bleeding, and then you need to smoke a cigarette. And so, if you've got 2 seconds to make a decision, which often in the military, that might be all you have, then you need to make your decision in 2 seconds. If you've got 2 hours to make it, 2 days, you may want to take all of that time. And I can think of so many instances of moral failures where the rationale, the reason, if you dive into why that failure happened, it was this idea, this false sense of urgency. The person really needed to stop the bleeding and then smoke a cigarette and think through the decision. And that's a metaphoric cigarette. Don't smoke cigarettes; they're bad. Okay. So I want to do a short case study, and this is not a case study that we asked you to read. So I'll just try to talk us through it. Jim, if I miss any details, I know Jim's taught this before. Please help me out with it. But this is about the case is about an incident with USS Dubuque, an LPD. I think this is in the late 80s, where the Dubuque has an interaction with a junk. So I got a picture of a Mark I junk there. This happens in the South China Sea. So that star in the middle there is where the incident happened. The Dubuque is commanded by a guy named Captain Balian. He is he's a decorated war vet. By all accounts, he's an excellent CO and commander. His mission, so there's Dubuque is home ported in Sasebo, Japan. The mission that he is given is to transit to Bahrain to take lead of a countermine operation out in the Arabian Gulf. And this is no small mission. Was it the Robert? Yeah, the Roberts had just struck a mine. We are in a sort of an undeclared war with naval war with Iran at the time. Roberts had just recently struck a mine, so this mission is somewhat urgent. He needs to get to the Gulf, and he needs to get there now. So as they're transiting, and again, kind of right where I've got that star, all of a sudden he runs into this Chinese or this junk that appears to be dead in the water. And so he's seeing this frantic waving. Someone appears to be jumping off of the junk, and they're swimming toward Dubuque. So he gets called up, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is all I need. And one other thing, he's slightly behind Pym. And what we mean by that is being behind Pym is you've got all these markers where you're supposed to be at a certain time. And if you're not at that marker yet, you're not at that point yet, you're behind Pym. You're behind your planned movement. So he's late right now. And all of a sudden he's got this problem. He's got this junk that appears on the horizon. So as you see a junk that's dead in the water, what are some of the things that you're going to want to know? And they seem to be in distress.
How many people are on board?
Yeah, definitely the numbers of people.
What kind of provisions they have on board?
Absolutely. Do they have enough food and water?
Where they're headed to?
Good, yeah. Where they're headed, maybe where they came from.
Yeah, if they're actually dead. Is the boat actually? Should they pose a threat?
Great, yeah. And I think somebody said something about the seaworthiness of the boat. So you're just going to start gathering. This is what commanding officers do. They just start gathering facts. And of course, the CO is trying to gather those facts as quickly as possible. So what are our potential? What are the potential things that we can do right now? What are the things that the CO should be thinking about? I'm going to do course of action A, B, or C.
You can inform somebody and request help.
Say that again, please.
Yes, sir. He can call for help using his communication circuits.
Sure, he'd call for help. Help's not too close.
Take everyone aboard? Is that allowed?
Yes.
Okay.
It absolutely is, and especially if that ship is, or that junk is deemed unseaworthy, is to embark the passengers. Of course, that's going to be a bit of a problem because he's trying to, where's he going to put all these guys? By the way, he's got 900 Marines on board.
He can board the ship and provide provisions and repairs if required.
Excellent. Just go out there, see what they need, make sure they got it, and then get going. By the way, I think I should mention something else about this. This is a sailboat, and it had gotten pretty far, as you can see. So he did ascertain pretty quickly, or he just sort of assumed they'd come out of Vietnam. This was a time when that was happening a lot, and they were probably going to the Philippines, which was a pretty routine thing that was happening at the time, and they had done it under sail. And so they had gotten there, you know, they'd been underway about 7 days or so, and they got to that point. Okay, but those are your courses, your basic courses of action. I think one of the courses of actions that does not really. So these are some of the legal considerations, and we are responsible. Naval ships are responsible for rendering assistance, but they really do give the commanding officer a great deal of latitude to make those decisions regarding determining seaworthiness, etc. The only course of action that he did not have, that the captain did not have, was to do nothing. Okay, so the choice that the CO made was that he didn't want to embark the refugees. What he does is he sends over his XO to do one very incapable Vietnamese translator who really just kind of makes a mess of things. Sends him over to evaluate the boat. But he also gives his XO an interesting order. He says, but I don't want you to board. You're not going to actually get on board that boat. So just go over there and talk to him. And so after that conversation, again, they had determined they had come this far. They evaluated their supplies and what they needed. And so he decided to provision the junk with both food and water and navigational charts, and then he sent them on their way. Marcus, could you play that video now? So I'm going to show a video of Captain Balian being interviewed by 60 Minutes.
Sorry. I'm just trying to share this so we can have it for the recording.
Oh, got it. Yeah. And then Marcus, if you could maybe stop it when we first meet the junk. Okay, so as I'm describing this junk that is under sail, that had come that far in 7 days, is that what you guys were thinking about? Was that the image that was in your mind?
No.
Okay, roll them, Cecil. Check out that sail.
All right. I think you might be muted, Roger. Sorry.
Well, you would think that after all this time doing remote teaching. All right. So, so Dubuque went back on with its mission. It resupplied them, the junk. And, you know, the food lasted for a few days. But then the boat ended up drifting for another 19 days. 30 people died during the course of those 19 days. And you know, with nothing to eat, people actually started turning to cannibalism. So this is about as bad as it gets. And what we later discovered was that the boat did have a working engine, and the working engine had been broken. So what they needed was a mechanic to fix the engine, rather than just some provisions and send them on their way. But again, the CO chose not to, or directed his XO not to go on board the ship. And just another 10 minutes would have changed that. Could have changed the situation significantly. So what role do you see that time playing in this issue? Why did he not see this? Maybe that's a better way of putting this. Why does he not see that he's got this rather important moral obligation? What was in his way?
He had to be in the Persian Gulf in a matter of time, and he's already behind schedule.
Absolutely, and I mean, and you could even make the point, Coach, that he had a responsibility. People had died in the Persian Gulf too, during when Robert struck that mine. So he has this responsibility to get there, and that's driving him right now.
I mean, I make mistakes when I'm late to my kid's music class, and that does not matter.
I don't know what his experience. They said that he had previously had picked up refugees twice before, so I'm wondering what that experience was like for he and his ship, and how that impacted his third round, where he had to make a decision about what he was doing.
So you thought that this was rowdier, and that's why he didn't send his XO aboard? Was that the?
That might have been his rationalization.
To your point, Coach, the idea of narratives may have played a role there too. So he had certain, there are probably some narratives playing in his mind about when he comments, it's like, hey, look, I've been doing this a lot. You'd be amazed at what you've seen underway here in this area. So there may have been some narratives that were also working against him. Any other thoughts?
He placed a lot of trust in the translator and the people, and his XO, and the people that were closer to the junk itself.
Yeah, it's a great point. And you know, we don't really talk about confirmation bias, but certainly if I'm Captain Bailey and I'm running late, I am looking for good reasons not to have to stay here anymore. And if my translator is saying X, Y, and Z, it's like, yeah, check, got it. I might not dive any deeper than that. Before I leave this case, Marcus or Jim, anything else to add?
I would just say one of my favorite social science experiments that some people may have heard of is in the 1970s they did at Princeton Seminary, they did what's called the Good Samaritan experiments, where they had seminarians like prepare to give a lecture on the Good Samaritan parable. And then they had someone who was feigning a heart attack on the way. And they told some of them that they were very late, and some of them they were a little late, and some of them they had time. And less than 10% of the people that were very late stopped and helped. And I asked my students why, and the number, I always get a lot of students saying, well, the sermon was probably, they thought that it was really important. And I said, well, I mean, what do you think that professors think about our classes? Like, how self-important do you think we are? Obviously, this is an important class, but it's not saving anyone's life. And they just missed the fact that the most common response is that they ask what guy. right? When they said, why didn't you stop and help a person having a heart attack? They said, what person having a heart attack? It literally changes the way that they see the world. And so many cases, and some of you actually talked about in your projects, right, are really, I think, cases of moral perception, and why we miss morally salient features, or why we miss that there's issues here at all. Yeah, I mean, that's all I'll add. I find it a fascinating case. I remember the first time I saw, because we have our students read the case, like read it. And I did that, and I had taught it once even, and then before I saw a picture. And I was like, oh, wait, what? That's what, anyway.
Excellent.
Frankie, from the leadership perspective, I would offer that you can get a sense from this commander, this commanding officer, that he has a bias for action. Okay, that's driving him to get to the Persian Gulf. And something that's particularly relevant right now in this day and age is the importance for that bias for understanding first before taking action. You know, and that's extremely important right now when we look at, you know, again, this is we have ethics, but when you start looking at near peer competitors, okay, I believe that our military is really shifting. We're having a bias for understanding before we go into a bias for action, before we ask or expect a bias for action. Over.
Boy, I think that's a great point, Frank. And that also kind of goes to culture, I think, as well. We have a culture that I think biases action. When really we should be taking time to smoke a cigarette every once in a while. Great.
Yeah, and Roger, the only thing I would add, when I do this, the 2 times I've done this, I tie it back to Lewis and the inner ring. And because the other part of the piece is that he's, one of the reasons he wants to get the ship to the Persian Gulf is because he's going to be the flagship,
Right.
and the admiral's going to be embarked. And you know, when you have an admiral on your ship, that's a big deal, and you know that's an inner ring thing. So that was the other piece of it, was that he really wanted to get there. So because the inner ring was, I think, really in his mind. And as you said, I think when he got the answers from the translator that he was hoping he got, he was absolutely thrilled and was able just to move on from that.
Excellent, Jim. Thanks.
Another piece thing that we can look at is the way he describes the refugees. It seems to be very dismissive. So it seems to me he doesn't see people, he doesn't see equal to him. And I think that's very important too.
Yeah.
We have to see the other as equals. Otherwise, I think you have this result. Well, they're very, very rowdy, right? They're like animals. They're not human.
Well, what if they were his kids on board? Do you think he would have embarked them?
Yeah.
Or do you think he would have just said, hey, you guys got to sail, you're good? I mean, you're right. You're absolutely right. He did not view them as human beings. They were an impediment.
Exactly. For me to do what is important. Right?
Yeah.
So I think
that's something that's important that we're going to be talking about in Marcus's section is that you know, moral deliberation for us is going to start with this fundamental idea that humans, as humans, have great, equal, and inalienable worth, and that kind of starts this whole process of at least deontological thinking, which is something that Marcus will be talking about. And by the way, not everybody buys off on this idea that humans have rights, but as humans, but most of us do. Most cultures do, and in the Navy and the Marine Corps, we most definitely do, and we can order people to. So, okay, I want to go through 2 more questions, and I'll go through them quickly. The next question, so is it still time to, and the next question, so now I've kind of tried to figure out how much time I have. The next question before I pull out my moral liberation roadmap is this a moral dilemma or a test of integrity? and just sort of based on the language there, can anybody maybe suggest what the difference might be between a test of integrity and a moral dilemma?
The test of integrity, you know the right answer.
Good. Yeah, you already know the right thing to do. Perfect. So I know the right thing to do, and I know the wrong thing to do. So, piece of cake. Some alerts to that if you need them. If what I'm doing is a violation of a law or a widely embraced norm, or if I'm telling a lie, there's probably a good chance that I'm confronted with a test of integrity. And I always note this for my students, that there are some laws, norms that should be broken. And there's sometimes that we should tell lies. Actually, we celebrate some people who violate bad laws and bad norms. But generally speaking, those are key points. And that brings us to the last question I'm going to talk about, and that's just, do I have the strength of character and the good judgment to do the right thing? And when I know what the right thing is. So that's real simple, but of course, is that easy? Has anybody known the right thing to do and the wrong thing to do and done the wrong thing? I mean, has anybody not? Yeah, I mean, so, moral temptation's a real thing. One of the things that we try to share with our students early is a video by Admiral McCraven. When he was speaking here at the Naval Academy, he said, don't compromise your integrity too often. And he said, we're human, and therefore we will have this, we will compromise our integrity sometimes. And he's not letting anybody off the hook. He says that, if you ever do that, you should, I think his words were, you should feel sick to your stomach. You should question your parentage and your right to exist on this planet. So you should really be hurt when you do this. But you should also forgive yourself. And I think that's kind of an important lesson for our students, for all Naval Academy. These guys, they've been put up on a pedestal for an awful long time, and they're going to be really afraid of falling off that pedestal. So they need to know that that we can tolerate some mistakes. Anyway.
Roger, do you want to take a break before we get into is the case coming up now?
Yes. No, I don't want to take a break because it's going to be I think it's going to be pretty quick. Okay. So the moral dilemma, again, this is, I don't yet know what the right thing to do is. Okay. There are some classics. Truth versus loyalty. I imagine that there's probably no bigger classic moral dilemma in the hall than that one. Justice versus mercy. That's going to be, our students will be facing that as ensigns and second lieutenants. Their first time they get a mast, and the CO says, "Okay, what do you think about Petty Officer X?" The few versus the many becomes particularly difficult if the few is the us and the many is them. Okay, this is the time we break out the moral deliberation roadmap. And I think I take it back. Why don't we take just a second? And this might be a good way of coming. Yeah. So we'll start with this after the break. Cool. I agree with Marcus. But actually, before we do that, though, let me pause for questions. What we're going to do when we come back is we're going to kind of run those first three questions through the Farsi Island case study. And then Marcus is going to do a deep dive into the moral deliberation roadmap, and then we'll look at the Farsi Island case study again. Okay, does that sound good? Got a plan?
Sounds good to me, Roger.
Okay,
Roger,
Yeah.
Real quick, so in your last, I think it said, strength of character and judgment,
yeah,
the skipper. I think what I would offer here is that, again, you know, opportunity to ask, did he even include others in the decision he was going to make? And the reason I say this is because commanding officers or people in leadership positions, you know, they know they have that authority to make those decisions, but the reality is, are you humble enough to be able to be inclusive enough in this type of decision-making process? And I think that's a good thing, right? To ask for help, you know, in some of these decisions. Don't know if that happened when you have senior Marine Corps officers there with the embarked debts. Of course, you got other leaders, but that applies also when it comes to, in a way, accountability. We tend to talk about, you know, accountability not to be delegated, but I would offer in this day and age, you're seeing a lot of accountability being shared across different echelons, especially when missions are very strategic in nature and the risk, you know, is high, and that is okay. So bottom line is, you know, again, when it comes to inclusivity, you know, leaders shouldn't feel like the decision they're about to make is theirs and theirs alone to make. It's okay to ask for help. Be inclusive. Over.
oh my, yes. To all the above. All right. See you at 10:20.